One might never think of a church being a place of physical conflict. Most people know church as a calm place of safety and salvation, while others take it much more seriously and are much more passionate about their religion. This video introduces you to a chaotic scene from Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings that takes place in her church. We will use the Close Reading Interpretative Tool or crit to analyze this passage.
Just as the elder opened his mouth, pink tongue waving, and said, "Great God of Mount Nebo," Sister Monroe hit him on the back of his head with her purse, twice. Before he could bring his lips together, his teeth fell. No, actually his teeth jumped out of his mouth. The grinning uppers and lowers lay by my right shoe, looking empty and at the same time appearing to contain all of the emptiness in the world. I could have stretched out a foot and kicked them under the bench or behind the collection table. Sister Monroe was struggling with his coat, and the men had all but picked her up to remove her from the building. Bailey pinched me and said without moving his lips, "I'd like to see him eat dinner now."
First, we begin with paraphrase. Paraphrasing is simply condensing the passage into a few key bullet points, signifying the most important parts. In Chapter 6, Marguerite, the speaker, describes a typical Sunday Mass. Reverend Thomas, the elder, is preaching, and a member of the church, Sister Monroe, comes to the altar and hits him. His dentures fall out and land right next to Marguerite. As the fight continues, Bailey mutters, "I'd like to see him eat dinner now."
Now we will move on to observe. During this step, we look only at the textual elements of the passage and decide which are significant to the overall meaning. Here is what we found. The use of sister is not in reference to a nun. In Marguerite's church, sister simply refers to a female member. Maya Angelou anthropomorphizes various objects, for example, his teeth jumped, grinning uppers and lowers, and pink tongue waving. She also uses interesting metaphorical phrases, in all the emptiness in the world and without moving his lips.
Next, we look to contextualize the passage. We look at biographical and historical information surrounding our author and the time period when the book takes place. In the case of the church incident in Chapter 6, we might think about the culture of Black religion in the 1930s and the hot, dramatic sing-song delivery of their sermons. Although this scene from the Blues Brothers takes place in the 1950s, the message is still the same. Likewise, we might consider Maya Angelou's deep spirituality and devotion to every religion, not just one.
Now, we take what we have learned through our observations and contextualizations and apply them to analyze the passage. For instance, we could claim that the personification of clearly inanimate objects, such as the Reverend's dentures, conveys the dramatic nature of the present situation. We could also claim the use of interesting descriptions, like all of the emptiness in the world, helps to explain Maya Angelou's unique point of view on her universe. Additionally, we might claim that the use of sister is not in reference to a nun. This conveys the closeness of the members of the church and how outrageous the situation is. Finally, we might claim that religious culture in the South in the 1930s illustrates the intensity of one's spiritual connection at that time and how passionate one can become.
Next, we unify what we found so far into a single paragraph, arguing our standing on the passage. The church passage from Chapter 6 of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings describes a wild scene in a Sunday Mass. Although this incident could be described quickly and concisely, Angelou's flowery use of personification and metaphor helps to convey the scene much more dramatically, and really to see the world through her eyes. This also lets us see Maya Angelou's religion from the inside, and witness the dramatic nature of Black religion at this time personally.
At the end of the crit process, we look at our interpretation of the passage and reflect on what we have learned, along with discussing some possible objections. Although we briefly discuss the phrases "all the emptiness in the world" and "without moving his lips," there is a possibility of much more meaning behind these confusing words. To go with the previous example, we could have looked deeper into the meanings of these phrases to find exactly what Marguerite is trying to convey. One could also argue our interpretation of Sister Monroe's violence. We decided it was passion. What if it was true anger? Another argument one could bring up is the validity of this recounting. What if most of the story is Marguerite's fantastical childhood imagination blowing a normal situation out of proportion?